So everyone, thank you for joining this virtual Hyperledger meetup today. I'm excited about the topic. Here, just one second. I am dropping the YouTube link in Zoom chat. So I'd like to introduce Satya Arigela, Archana Nigam, and Ajin Sunny from Infosys. They are going to be speaking today about Blockchain Explorer. This is a lab that is creating a blockchain network monitoring utility. This is based on code from Hyperledger Explorer, a project that many people in the community were using. And so I'm very glad and excited that the development of this is continuing, because I think there's going to be a lot of people who are interested in what's happening and to hear what's the latest, what's the plan, and how they can get involved and how they can use it. So with that, if you do have any questions about anything that's going to be discussed today, again, we welcome your questions. Please feel free to type in the Zoom chat or to raise your hand, and then we're happy to take your questions. With that, let me hand it off. So Satya, please take it away.
Yeah, thanks, David. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Hi, good morning, all. Good morning and good evening. Yeah, so today we'll be covering about the blockchain Explorer, so which we build on top of Hyperledger Explorer code. Okay, so basically, yeah. First of all, thank you for taking time and joining the session. So I'm Satya, Senior Technology Architect from Infosys, Blockchain Service Line. So I have Archana and Ajin along with me. So we'll also be talking about Blockchain Explorer. So Blockchain Explorer project now currently it's part of Hyperledger Labs. Okay, and Infosys started contributing to Explorer project on top of the earlier Hyperledger Explorer code base from last year actually. And this year we submitted two proposals, one for Explorer feature enrichment, and the other one for enhancing UI, which are part of mentorship program. Okay, Achana, next slide. So for today, like we'll be going with the below agenda. Like basically, we'll talk about monitoring and its importance before deep diving into Blockchain Explorer. And then we'll have introduction to Blockchain Explorer, where we'll be talking about the key characteristics of Blockchain Explorer, what all features we have. And then we'll talk about Blockchain Explorer architecture view, where we'll cover all the components of the Explorer and how it will be integrated with the Fabric network, and also the application flow, how the flow happens from ledger to database and from database to this one on the UI side. And we'll be talking about the new features implemented on top of the earlier Hyperledger Explorer code base. And then we'll have application walkthrough and the demo, like the configuration, how it has been done, and we'll do some live transactions and see how it gets synced with the network. Okay, then we'll talk about the issue status, like what are the issues we close and how many issues are currently open. Then we'll talk about the current ongoing activities that will be part of the feature scope. And then the floor will be open for questions and any suggestions. Basically, suggestions, we are looking for the features which you would like to have on the Blockchain Explorer. So that is one thing. Yeah, yeah, it's the next slide. Yeah. So before we deep dive into Blockchain Explorer, basically I will cover quickly about the monitoring and its importance. So identifying and mitigating suspicious behavior should be the first job for any blockchain teams. So although blockchain technology is designed to provide secure transactions with an immutable record, so there are still several ways that network security and policy violations still may occur. Okay, so enterprise chains are getting hacked. So endpoints and nodes within the network remain vulnerable. So there are some events or activities which required frequent monitoring. Otherwise, many may which will impact the overall network health. Okay, so these events may happen due to the deployed infrastructure, code, network, etc., or due to any other external factors as well. So some of the suspicious behaviors alerts may be like we can see on this slide, like increases in failed transactions. If you see a lot of transactions keep failing, and changes to access controls and permissions, we need to check whether it has happened as per the business requirement or any suspicious activities happening, and multiple failed login attempts and unauthorized new users, and performance degradation, overall network performance degradation, CPU degradation, right? And sudden spikes or drops in the transaction volume, and the transaction times that fall outside of the normal business hours. So usually they will be having some business hours. Beyond that, if any transactions happens, so we need to keep an eye on those things. And also the proactive or precautionary monitoring of events is required with respect to the transaction volume and the contract usage, what all the contracts, smart contracts written, how those been used, and the validation speeds and the overall chain health. And we need to have a real-time transaction view and the logs and alerts, and the real time we need to monitor those things. Okay, next slide actually. So all these monitoring activities, whatever we check now, so this can be broadly categorized into the below 5 categories, like basically identify and mitigate suspicious behavior, and receive real-time alerts for any critical issues. Suppose if any node is down, if it's not a transaction not happening, and the transactions are keeping piled up, right? So all those things we need to have real-time monitoring, and also analyze blockchain data and events. So it maybe not be easy like to analyze the data, because the blockchain data which are having most of the hashing and all happening. So we need to have proper data and events to have a proper audit and create and access auditable records. So where we'll be creating the auditable records, so that during any audit time, right, so it will be easy for any auditor to check what is the type of transactions, whether any privacy issues happen, and all those things. It can be easy to do that. And the final thing is ensure the security and health of the blockchain. So hence, for any application or project, it is required to have the continuous monitoring of DLT network health and processing exceptions on any node. For example, any errors in the smart contract code and any other issues with respect to communication between the nodes, and the security monitoring for usual and unexpected behavior. The same way network monitoring for unknown network traffic, and the performance degradation monitoring. So these are the things which we need to have the monitoring enabled for all those things. Okay, next slide. Actually. So with this, we'll define what is Blockchain Explorer and what are the key characteristics on this. So Blockchain Explorer, it's a simple, powerful, easy to use, well-maintained open source utility to browse activity on the underlying blockchain network. So it is a user-friendly web application tool for visualizing blockchain operations of the Hyperledger Fabric platform to view or query blocks and transactions associated with the data. Okay, and then the network information, we'll have the network and node names and list of nodes, the status of this, and the chain codes and transaction families, as well as any other relevant information stored in the ledger. It provides the transparent view of the activity on the network, and users can easily identify, quickly troubleshoot, and resolve the issues with Explorer. And Explorer attempts to provide an easy visualization by using graphs, charts, pictures, and templates, in addition to the usual search and monitoring facility. Okay? And it has a rich user interface developed using latest technologies such as React.js, Google Material UI, and WebSockets. This tool is primarily designed for developers, editors, and administrators who need to track and examine the behavior and the operation of the blockchain network. So, and it also has API support, where Blockchain Explorer provides APIs that allows developer to integrate the Explorer with other blockchain applications. Okay, so the key features of Blockchain Explorer includes the module that can listen and query Hyperledger Fabric network, and this is the utility that can get the latest status, blocks, and networks, and the chain codes, and we can view the blocks and the transactions. And it also has the feature like blocks and transactions metrics by hours and minutes, search and filter blocks and transactions by date range, and also with the channels. Okay, and dynamically discover new channels and switch data representation by channels. So if you have multiple channels, we can switch the channels so that we can have the data related to that channel, and get real-time notification of any new blocks. So whenever you create any new transaction or block size, it will be notified on the dashboard of the Blockchain Explorers. So there are two options to get started with Explorer. The first option will be using Codebase, where we need to have the prerequisites will be like Node.js and PostgreSQL need to be installed, and we need to have JQ installed, and the Linux-based operating system such as like Mac OS and Ubuntu will work. And if you want to run any end-to-end testing, we need to have the Golang to be installed. And other option we have is using the Docker, basically we need to have Docker and Docker Compose as a prerequisite to start with the second option. So with this, I'll stop here and hand over to Ajin to cover about the application architecture and the application flow. Okay, yeah, thank you all. Ajin, please.
Thanks, Satya. Good morning, good afternoon all. I am Ajin and working as an associate consultant at Infosys. Well, I'm sure that most of the people in this meeting might have attended the previous meetups and be familiar with the Hyperledger Fabric Blockchain Explorer architecture and its designs. Even though I'm briefly explaining the Blockchain Explorer architecture and designs for the people who are not part of the previous meetups and who are new to the Hyperledger Fabric Blockchain Explorer project. In this slide, we will discuss about the high-level architecture of a Blockchain Explorer. The Blockchain Explorer project consists of main three parts, and they are the underlying Hyperledger Fabric network, the Explorer backend, and the presentation layer. As we know, the need of Blockchain Explorer is to pull the network information and show it to the end user. So primarily, we need a Hyperledger Fabric network, which is up and running in background. And at the top, we have the presentation layer, the UI. The user interface is a single page application that is built with React.js. And at the middle layer, we have the Explorer backend packed with different services like REST API, database service, metric service, sync service, Fabric SDK, and the database. The Hyperledger Fabric SDK allows applications to interact with the Fabric blockchain network. Similarly, we have the Fabric SDK in Blockchain Explorer so that it can interact with the Fabric blockchain network and bring up the network information. In Blockchain Explorer, we will create a common connection profile for a peer, and with that peer, we will initialize the Fabric client and populate the network data. Within the Fabric client, we'll make use of the discovery service to get the peer information on the network. Next, we have the sync service, and it is the core part of the Blockchain Explorer. Sync service helps to sync the data between the network and the database in the Explorer. Sync service periodically fetch data from the ledger and network and update the database also. We also have the Fabric Event Listener added with this service, which enables updating the database whenever the network has some updates, like whenever new transaction is being created, the sync service is able to fetch the data and update to our off-chain database. Next, we also have the metric services to show the metrics like ledger height, blocks by minute, blocks by hour, transaction by minute, transaction by hour, etc. Next is the database service, comes up with CRUD operations to update the DB. When the Blockchain Explorer application is started, we will fetch and store the ledger data and network information into our Explorer database so that we can reduce the amount of time required to fetch the data from the ledger. And the database we used here is the Postgres database. And we also have REST APIs, which is used to serve data to UI, and the middle layer is built with TypeScript. On to the next slide. In this slide, we'll have an application flow explaining how data is moved over the Explorer application. As I said in the previous slide about the architecture, Explorer has three layers: the network, the Explorer backend, and the UI. Here we can see a running Fabric network. In the Explorer, we have a synchronizer or the sync service. When the application starts, the sync service will fetch the data and store the data to the database available. Once we load the initial network information and we are ready to share the rest, we are ready to share this data to the end user via UI. We have our UI, which is connected to the REST APIs and gets the data from the database. And this is how normally the data flows in the Blockchain Explorer. So, and to the next to the flow diagram, we can see a table. And this table is mentioning about the latest supporting version of Fabric, Explorer, and Node.js. As of now, Blockchain Explorer can support Fabric versions from version 1.4 to 2.3. Parallelly, we are also trying to make Explorer compatible with the latest Fabric versions. Those changes and testings are going on. Then the Explorer version currently, we have this version 1.18, and we will be releasing soon version 2.0 in the next weeks with the new features added. And also the minimum supporting version for Node.js is version 12.13.1 to 16.4.1. And to the next slide. Yes. In this slide, we have the new features implemented for the new release of Blockchain Explorer. As you can see, a list of items over there. And the first one is the display of health status of peer. In the current Blockchain Explorer, we can see the number of peers and orders in the network. But what happens if one of the peer is down? As an end user, the user is not aware of the peer status, even though the user is monitoring the current Blockchain Explorer. But with this feature, we will show the health status of all peers and orders in the network, whether it is alive or not, whether it is up or running or not. And we have a new feature called search by block ID and transaction ID or block range. If you have visited the Etherscan application of Ethereum, you can see these options there, like search with block ID, transaction ID, hash, and all. But this feature was missing in our Explorer. So we also bought the same feature where we can search with block ID, transaction ID, and also we can get blocks information in a block range. Like if I want to get 1 to 10 block info, I can specify the start and end block number so that I can get the block data within a block range. And here we also changed the client-side pagination to a server-side pagination. If you remember the transactions and blocks tab in the current Explorer, the Explorer is loading all the transaction and blocks data to the client side, and pagination was performed from the client side. But now it is totally moved to the server-side pagination, hence improved the performance as well. Next feature is like chain code metadata, like display of chain code metadata. This is a new feature in Explorer where we'll show the chain code information. In Explorer, we have a chain code tab where we'll show the chain code information like name, version, and deployed channel, etc. There we added a new feature to see the metadata of a chain code. This metadata will show the information like basic info, components, and schemas. Infos means like the chain code specific names, and component specifies like what are the functions available in a chain code, and schema represents that are struct data types that have been used in a chain code. So basically we can see like the outline structure of a chain code with the help of this feature. Next important feature we added is Helm charts for Explorer and the DB. With this new feature, Explorer is packed as a Helm chart and ready for container deployments to Kubernetes cluster. We also have added as a new feature like moving images from Docker Hub to GitHub container registry. So currently Explorer Docker images are available with Docker Hub, and soon we'll be moving those images to GitHub container registry. And finally, we have the purge Explorer DB data based upon block count or duration. So, but this feature still is in progress and will be released as a patch release soon after once we of the current release. As I said in the architecture, we have our sync service in the Explorer backend, where the sync service will fetch all the ledger data and network information and store into the Explorer database. So what if the case there is a huge data in the ledger? Loading this large data into database, fetching this data from the database also makes Explorer very slow. As an alternative to this problem, we will store only the latest data into the database based upon the block count or time duration. Means we will store only the latest specified number of blocks for past 7 days data like that. If I would give an example, like if I have thousands of records, like thousands of blocks, like for example, say like 10,000 blocks I have in my ledger, and if I try to load everything, the 10,000 records to a off-chain database, it might make the performance very low. So what we'll do, like we will fetch only the latest 1,000 blocks or the blocks which have been created past 7 days, something like we'll take as a configurable, and we'll load such amount of blocks to our off-chain database. So this is configurable based upon our user choice. So whether user can decide whether it can be taken from by the block count or the time. And that's all about the new features we have developed. And next we'll have a demo on the new features. Archana will take over the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Ajin. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone with respect to their time zones. My name is Archana, and I currently work as a consultant here at Infosys. Without any further delay, let's start with our presentation. So before we get into application demo, let's once visit the official GitHub page of Blockchain Explorer. So this is the official GitHub page of Blockchain Explorer. Let me scroll down. So here it is an update saying Explorer now can be used with Hyperledger Iroha as well. Okay, some time back, Ajin speaking about the release notes as well. He has covered. And Satya was also talking about how do we start an Explorer application. It can be done in two ways. One is using Docker. These are the prerequisites. One important thing to note over is the Explorer containers and Fabric containers should reside in the same Docker network. And second important thing is the volume be properly mapped. All right. So you can start the container services using these commands.
Archana? Hello, we are not able to hear you, Archana.
Hello.
Yeah, Archana, now we can hear you. Yeah, we lost you for the past 1 minute.
For the past, wait it like, shall I? Okay, I'll move on to the application demo. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, fine.
So earlier I was talking like bringing the Explorer application using the code base. So we have well-defined steps and instructions have been provided here. One can easily set up the Explorer application using the documentation.
Can you please share the screen, Archana? I think we lost the screen.
Oh, okay. Can you able to see my screen?
Yeah, visible now. You can please go ahead.
Yeah. All right. So I was talking about like how do we bring up the Explorer application using the code base. So we have well-defined steps and instructions that have been provided here. One can easily set up the Explorer application using the documentation. One can also refer the link below for more detail on each configuration. All right. Let me also show you the official documentation of Hyperledger Explorer. You can visit this link where we can get the official documentation of Explorer. Okay. All right. Let's start our demo. So I have already the Fabric network up and running. This is basically the test network from the Fabric samples. I have two organizations, each organization contributing one peer each and an orderer. Okay, this is what all about the Fabric network. Then we'll start our Blockchain Explorer application. I'm starting the Blockchain Explorer application using Codebase. I've already cloned the Git repository and set up the DB and install the required modules. Let us start the application. All right. Okay, this is how the sign-in page looks like. We can have as many networks defined in the configuration file. As of now, I have defined only one network. Let me log into the application using the credentials. Explorer admin is a username. Explorer admin PW is the password. Let us sign into the application. All right, this is how the dashboard looks like. Let's take a glance of each tab and navigate to each one for more details. So the dashboard page looks like this. Network page where we get information about the peers, auditors, and their ledger height. Blogs and transaction, we would get the information about the blogs and transaction. Similarly, chain codes where we would get the information about the chain codes deployed, and channels, the number of channels that are available with respect to this particular network. We do have the number of channels. This is one of the most important key characteristic of Explorer. That is, Explorer discovers the new channels and switch data representation by channels. We do have a bell icon where we would get the real-time notification of blocks. Let's move on to the dashboard now. So if you can see here, there are 27 blocks, 28 transactions, 2 nodes, and 1 chain code. We can move to the right-hand side. Here we can see the metrics. The metrics are like blocks per hour, blocks per minute, transaction per hour, and transaction per minute. Here we can see date, time, and the number of transactions at that particular moment. We do have also a chart indicating the transactions by each organization. When we move to the left-hand side, we would get the latest 3 blocks data, that is block 24, 25, and 26, to which channel it belongs to, data hash, and the number of transactions into this particular block. Let's click over this and see what happens. If we see here, this is a block related information, to which channel it belongs to, the block number, at what time it got created, and the number of transactions in this particular block, and block hash, data hash, and pre-hash. This is what all the block information we would get. Now let's discuss about the new features. We can go through the few new features one by one. That is search by transaction hash. Let's take the transaction from here. And input over here and see what happens. A model would be open where we can get the transaction details. We will discuss about this transaction details in detail in the transactions tab. All right, what if I try to give a transaction hash which is invalid or not found? Let's see what happens. It says me that transaction is not found. Okay, now we'll switch to block number. Let me give some invalid block number and see what happens. Let me input the same thing. So it says me, please enter valid transaction hash or block number. Let me give the block number which is not found, something like 30, and see what happens. It says me that block is not found. So let's try for a success case where we have a block number. Similar model would be open where we would get the block details. This is what all about the search by transaction hash and the block number. Now let's discuss one of the most interesting feature, that is display health status of peers and auditors. If you see, we will get the peer names and auditor names over here and the status of it. The green indicates these particular nodes are online. So we make one of the node down and see what happens. Let me take it from here. We stop this peer and see what happens. As syncing happens, it will take some time to reflect the status over here. Oh, I'm so sorry. I think I have stopped the CouchDB. Let me restart it. All right. Yeah, as you can see the status over here. Now the PR has gone down and the status has been reflecting over here. It is red and the status been depicted as offline. Let me bring the PR back again. All right. It will take some time again to come into online status. So this is what all about the health status of peers that we have implemented. Next, let's move on to the network tab. So if you see here, we have the peer names, request URL, and what type of peer or auditor it is, MSP ID, and the ledger height. Since this peer has gone down, we were not able to fetch the status. Once it is up, the status would be reflected over here. All right. As you can see, it has come up and the status has been reflected over here. Now let's move on to blocks tab. So here we can filter the data based on date range. We can also apply filter on the organizations. Let me select filter. Let me select some date and let me filter the data. So this is all the data that is available within this date range. So Ajin, some time back, Ajin was saying that earlier pagination was handled from UI. Now it is managed from backend. All right. So we would get the block number, channel name, number of transactions, data hash, block hash, and all this information in the blocks tab. Let us click over here and see what happens. So our model would be open and this is what the information we would get about the block. And similarly, if we click on transaction, the same transaction model would be open where we would be getting the information with respect to transaction. We can also apply filter. Let's apply filter on organization 1 and see. So as we can see, we have this much data available when we apply a filter on this. And this is again a new feature that is search by block range. The range has been pre-populated over here. We can select number of blocks as 10 here. And let me input start block and end block here and see what happens. 0 to 9. So we would get the information 0 to 9 blocks of data. If I try to search from 9 to 9, what it happens? So it gives me block number 9 data. What if try to search from block number 11 to 9? So it says me 2 blocks should be less than or equal to from block. So this is what all about the blocks type. Next, we'll move on to transactions. So similar to blocks, the same information we would also get on transactions. We do have a filter on date range. Let me select the date and search. So this is what all the data that is available within this date range. We can also apply filter over here. Okay, this is what all the transactions by organization do. So let me open this transaction model and we'll discuss. So here we would get the transaction ID, whether this particular transaction is valid or invalid. We do also have payload proposal hash, the creator MSP, who are the endorsers, which chain code it belongs to, what type of transaction this is, at what time it got created, and the reads and the writes. Let's expand and see. So this is what the information we would get on read set. All right, then we expand the writes and see. So this is what the write set that we are able to see here. So this is what all about the transaction model. Next, let's move on to chain codes. So here we could able to see the number of chain codes installed, deployed as part of this particular channel. So we have a chain code named basic of version 1 and version 2 available, and the transaction count. And the new feature that we would like to discuss over here is display metadata of chain code. This is basically, say for example, if a user likes to see what all the functions that are available as part of his contract and what it returns and the number of arguments that's been passed to that particular function. So he can have a quick view over here. That is the display metadata of chain code. This is a hyperlink given over here. When we click on this, a model would be opened where we have 3 layers: info, contracts, and components. So if we expand here, we would have the transactions. This is what the name of the functions that has been defined over the smart contract. So we have 8 functions defined over here. Let me expand and show. So this is the name that is called asset exists. And these are the input parameters. And this is the return type of this particular function. Let's expand this one and see. So this is the name of the function get all assets. It returns an array. And the reference has been provided here. All right. So this reference has been referred to schema. So component schemas at asset, components, schemas, and this is the asset. So this is what all about the displaying metadata of chain code. All right. Now let's move on to channels. So in the channels tab, we would get the number of channels that are available as with respect to this particular network. So in this network, we have 2 channels, channel 2 and my channel B. Number of logs and transactions with respect to this particular channels. And one more thing we need to check is like, we need to see whether real-time syncing of data is happening or not. Let post or invoke a transaction and see what happens. So in this particular channel, we have 27 blocks and 28 transactions. So when we invoke this transaction, it has to get incremented by 1. Let's do that. So if you can observe here, earlier it was 28. Now it has been increased to 28 and 29 blocks. We also got a notification saying block 27 added to channel. All right. One more thing also I would like to show. That is multiple transactions in a block. So if you observe this block, we have multiple transactions, and even we can click on this and check the transaction details. All right, this is with respect to one channel. We do have a user management where we can add users as well who can access this application. Then we'll switch to other channel. So similar to my channel B, the other channel, the same information that is available as part of this particular channel, we could view over here. So this is what all about the application demo. And any doubts, or shall I continue further? All right. Next, let's take some time understanding about the issues that have been identified and their status. So these are some of the issues which are closed and some of the issues we are still open. So some of the closed issues we have listed over here is like test cases failing, Explorer Docker image build failed, empty org is being displayed while fetching the list of orgs, and so on. This is some of the open issues like ledger height and peer status is not updating with respect to multiple channels. So while we are testing Explorer application with Fabric version 2.4.7, we observed that the ledger height, which was in the networks tab with respect to other channel, was not updating properly. Okay, so we almost have fixed this issue and we are testing it. So let's see, let's pick one of this issue and see how this how this is like created, documented, and resolved. Let me copy this. And go to the issues. So there, if we see, we have listed only few issues, but if you can see here, there are 19 open and 30 closed. So if you can see here, this is an issue, this is a PR. Let me open this. So this is how we are documenting over here. When we try testing the Explorer with Fabric version 2.4.7, what we have observed was the first transaction, which is of config type, doesn't have any creator MSP. So while we are trying to fetch the list of organizations, we were getting an empty organization. So that is what we have given a screenshot over here. And we have explained, we have like documented what it expected to happen and how it can be reproduced. Let me also show you the PR for this and how we have resolved it. So this is a PR. Then we have given this particular PR resolves this particular issue, and it's been reviewed by Aditya. And it's a minor query change that we have done in order to fix this issue. And thus we have resolved and merged to the main branch. So this is how we are creating issues and resolving so on. So this is what all about the issues status and their creation. Let's move on to future scope. So these were some of the items that were outlined during our weekly status calls. The first one was like research on metrics and bring up possible metric features. So we were referring to this documentation. So we have Prometheus metrics. We were thinking we could pick any of the feature from here and bring this particular feature and integrate with our Blockchain Explorer application. So that is first line item. And second thing is like, we would like to make this Explorer application compatible with all the latest release versions of Fabric. Third one is like similar to Etherscan, we would like to have our Explorer application in terms of robust UI design. And the fourth one is like user management. We would like to really remodulate the user management, thus by avoiding the administration key dependency. We do have a reference link over here. Let me go through that. So we have listed all the light items over here in this project plan. This is actually the mentorship project plan. So if anyone has time, they can go through it, milestones and all these things we have mentioned over here. So this is what all about from my side, and we are open for questions and suggestions. We do also have a Discord channel, Blockchain Explorer. One can visit over there for if you are facing any issues. And even if you are facing any issues, you can raise them directly in the issues section of Hyperledger Explorer. We will try to answer from over here. Any questions in the chat window, Satya?
No, there is only one question, like whether this is open source or not. So I replied for that. So we're waiting for questions. Yeah, still we can use 2.4.7 with 118 actually. Yeah, we can use that. We'll be releasing the next version maybe in a couple of weeks. So currently we have Fabric and Iroha only. So other things still we are not at looking into that. So basically, once these two things are done, maybe it will be like we are also planning for uniform dashboard. So where it will support for all other platforms also. But currently work has not started on that. Only Fabric and Iroha we are supporting now. No, these are not funded by Infosys. It's we are contributing as part of the open source. So we are contributing for this open source community. That's it. But it still is part of Hyperledger Labs only. Whatever the Explorer code we have earlier, we started doing the changes on top of that only. Arun, do you want to answer anything on the funding? So some questions are there. How can we get funding on this?
Right. So none of the projects are like funded, right? So the funding or the contribution from each company is the time that they spend, the developers from each company they spend in open source activity itself. That's how it works. And apart from that, if you're asking specifically about the mentorship project, yes, there are like a couple of mentorship programs which are based on Explorer this year. And those are paid for by the mentorship program guidelines, right? So that's how the uh, mentorship program works. And that's a Linux Foundation mentorship program. I also see another question on support for RBAC is planned or not. So yes, IAM integration and support for RBAC is one of the features that will be picked up very soon. It's in plan for it's in plan to be taken up by the mentee who is contributing. If you're willing to get started on that, we welcome you to join the bi-weekly calls of the project, and then all these features can be discussed in detail in those meetings.
Hi, I'd like to ask a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi. Yes,
Hi.
I type in the channels on the chat. I'm glad to see that Infosys is adding code to the Explorer, but we just switched from Explorer to Hyperledger Fabric Operator. So I'm trying to understand what is the difference from a long-term perspective, supported by the technical steering committee.
I'll probably take that answer. So for detailed analysis of what each project provides in terms of features, it's documented elsewhere, and we can look through it and share it across to audience of this meetup. So operations console main purpose is on the operation side, which is to deal with deploying the fabric components and then maintaining the fabric blockchain network, right? And however, the Explorer's main goal is to give visibility into what's happening in the blockchain network. And I do understand like operations console does also have certain capabilities where you can say what's the latest block information on each peer nodes. Just the way of how these work is different. And Explorer is purely focused on the operations when the operations in terms of observability and then knowing what's happening on the blockchain across the network. So yeah, these are the problem statements that Explorer solves. So you could consider this to be equivalent to some of the other projects that you might have seen in open source or in public blockchain ecosystem, which allows you to explore through different blocks and know the contents of those blocks, know which transactions went into those. So that's the kind of problem statement that Explorer solves.
Yeah, the Hyperledger Fabric operator also shows the blocks and the content of the blocks. It also shows the private data collection, which I don't think the Explorer can expose today. I could be wrong, but I like the Explorer UI because you can do a lot of query. There's no doubt you folks are doing a great job. I'm just wondering, because we just switched from Explorer to Hyperledger Fabric operator. So I was wondering about the long-term view, long-term support. If we have to switch back, we will do so. But I'm just wondering, what is Hyperledger Foundation? Is it something that the user has to determine? I mean, we'll do that. If you don't know the answer, that's okay. We just, this is open forum. I'm just bringing this up.
Well, I can jump in and help answer that, Arun. I mean, in terms of the long-term support and the direction, and if that's something that you're interested in, I mean, the way open source works is if you're using a project or code and it's relevant for you and it's important to you, the way to make sure that it evolves in the direction that you want and the reason to make sure that it stays active is to contribute. So, as we've been sharing on this meetup, you're welcome to get involved. Join the calls, join the Discord channel. You can, help move it forward. You can help make it into what you want. So we definitely welcome your contributions. And the
David,
more people who contribute, yeah.
Right, David, I understand that. I think I share a link in the chat. It says that Explorer was end of life May of last year by the TSC. So there must be a reason by the TSC to make that decision.
Oh, I see what your question. Well, yeah, okay, I see. Well, the reason was the previous maintainers for the Explorer project left and they went to the TSC and told them that, like, hey, we had, their priorities changed, they shifted, they were no longer available. And so nobody at the time was available to keep the project going forward. So if there's a project with no maintainers, the TSC will move it to archived. And the reason for that is we don't want to communicate to people who are looking at, the Hyperledger community that a project is active if it's not. But, there were I think this is a great story of how open source works. There were a lot of people who were using Explorer, and as soon as they found out that the previous maintainers were no longer, able to maintain it, they stepped up and took the code forward. So I think it's a really great example of, again, if you care about something and are using something, if you want to get involved, you can, evolve it. So it's not, the TSC is happy to see the lab, evolve and thrive and grow. And so,
Right, David, I understand that this is all in good spirit. I'm just pointing out, if the direction is Hyperledger Fabric operator, don't you think that the resources should be directed that way rather than, I understand it's the availability of the maintainer. I'm just pointing out because we just switched from Explorer to Hyperledger Fabric.
No, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I think it's the way the open source works. It's not the TSC or the Hyperledger staff to determine the direction. It's really the people in the community. An open source community does what people in that community choose to do, right? So if people in the community choose to use one project over another, that's what happens, right? So again, it's really up to you and the other people on this call, how to move forward. And if you want to collaborate with Operator, if there's, an overlap between some of the functionality, you could always do that collaboration and potentially, merge the similar efforts, right? I mean, it's whatever the community chooses to do is what happens.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know, Arun, I mean, as somebody on the TOC, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in, but if you have anything to add to that, please.
Right. So I think you covered it well, right? So the TOC's roles wouldn't come in terms of how each project maintainers decide to go. However, from a TOC standpoint, we try our best efforts to unify efforts if similar efforts are going on across. And when it comes to operations console and then the Explorer itself, the way I see it is operations console eventually can have integration in it for Explorer, right? That's how I see it. It's not a competitor project, it's rather a complementing project. So operations console has its own logic for fetching blocks data and showing the transactions data right now. I know those are API based, and eventually the operations console can have an integration where it can have Explorer as part of it, right? So it's a complement than a competition. And this is like the technical view of how these projects should be seen. So operations console has the deployment related things in it, whereas Explorer is purely on the observability stack. So it's a complement, not a competition.
Yeah, so there are reasons why you might use both. If I'm understanding correctly.
That's correct. And eventually the Explorer is being planned so that we have unified experience for all the different blockchains. And hopefully we right now are getting started with that effort. We need more contributors. I saw some questions on the Besu as well. I think this is the great point. If there are enough people interested in the Besu work, it's definitely time for us to get started, and let's collaborate and join the calls for Explorer and get started on that. So Mahesh, we saw the question. I think there may be some complications in the way how private data can be seen from the explorers. It may depend on the node that the current explorer is connected to. So when you saw the demo, most of the components that you saw, like they were showing the nodes for online or offline, and then showing the current block height across them. And these are all possible through the metrics that we could collect across the network. And if it is private data, then yes, that can be integrated. But then we need to have those provisions saying that this private data is as seen by this particular node in the network. And of course, it's not possible for Explorer to go and see what's possible to see from other nodes who we are not connected to. So that's definitely something we could explore in terms of how the feature can benefit. So there is a participant on this call. So this is related to the Explorer features and then the new UX, user experience itself, and what features we would like to see in it. So Deepika, who is on the call, is going to work on those things. And we are going to send a survey soon. Like David will talk more about how the survey is sent. Please share all these inputs so that all of this can be considered.
Thank you, Arun. Yeah, that would be happy to participate in providing some feedback. We see some real need for it because in a consortium, imagine being able to give every person in the consortium and explorer, that they'll be able to see their private data along with the generic, non-private blockchain data. So it can be like a very nice tool, which really improves adoption. Right now, we struggle with why would a partner run a node kind of a question, right? So I think that's where the question is from. But thank you for that. We'll participate in the survey.
Deepika, probably this is right time if you want to jump in and talk about the work that you would do and then the survey that you're going to send.
Thank you, Arun. So hi everyone, I'm myself Deepika. I'm currently a mentee for Hyperledger redesign project. So David will be sending you a form for our user experience research survey. So where you can give your pain points, what all the features you feel you are missing from the Explorer project, and you can mention how the usability is now and how you see you can improve it. So if anyone has any feedbacks you can give now, you can give now itself. Thank you.
Great. And look for your email for that. Later today or tomorrow, I will send an email out to everyone who registered for this meetup. And I'll also include links to the repo, the meeting invite, the Discord channel, slides, if they're available, and other resources. Are there any other questions anybody has? Okay. Well, if not, thank you for joining. And again, this is just, one opportunity to talk about Blockchain Explorer. If you would like to talk more about this, there's always, as we were saying, the Discord channel, the regular calls, and we hope to continue the conversation with you. If you're interested in what's going on, please do show up, and we're happy to talk with you more. We're happy to, collaborate with you, and we look forward to talking to you in the future. So thank you for joining today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Thanks for your time. Yeah.
That's it.
Thanks, everyone.